Well, welcome to the Stack of Stats podcast. I am your host, Pam Maldonado, bringing you all of the analytics behind the ATP bets. Tennis is back, and I am so excited. It is New Year's Eve, and I am ending the new year doing exactly what I love, and that is talking tennis. So with me, I am joined by TennisChannel broadcaster Gill Gross, Gill_Gross on Twitter, part of the CrackedRacquets podcast, and host of the Monday Match Analysis on YouTube. Gill, I am excited, like super amped. Please tell me you're super excited for the New Year tennis too.
Oh, I am. Happy New Year, Pam, and thanks for having me on again. Always enjoy it.
We have the first tournament of the year starting this week. It's ATP Adelaide in Australia. It is the first of 4 tournaments leading up into the ATP first major of the year, the Australian Open, my favorite tournament of the year, if it's not Wimbledon. So we're going to preview that here in a little bit. But first, I do want to have more of like a general conversation, an outlook into the 2023 season. It's been a while. Like, I know for me, I've been focused on football. So since the US Open, I kind of like teeter off away from tennis a bit, and then I get back into it as the new year starts. So I want to look at maybe like rising stars that I'm not looking at or considering yet. Which player was maybe like a bust last season that could do well in 2023, and vice versa. Which player maybe overperformed last year and could be a bust in 2023. So let's first look at some of the individual players. And I'm saying that this is a bust in 2022. And I'm interested to see what you think of his outlook for 2023. Daniil Medvedev, 45-19 win-loss record last year. Only 2 titles. I mean, only 2 titles. That's more than most. But ATP 500 Vienna, that was on indoor hard. He won the ATP 250 Los Cabos on hard court. Medvedev first hit world number 1 ranking in late February for just 2 weeks. And then he stayed steady at number 1 from June through August. He enters the year as world number 7. My concern for Medvedev is that he had some really questionable losses this year. He lost to Poland's Hubert Hurkacz twice, first in Miami on hard and then in Germany on grass. He was entirely exploited by Tim van Rijthoven on grass, who at the time was ranked 205 in the world, had very little ATP experience. He lost to Roberto Bautista Agut on grass, like, okay. Tsitsipas in Cincinnati, that's a surface that I would like Medvedev should have the edge on. But tell me, Daniil Medvedev, man, what do you think? It was in my opinion, it was like a roller coaster ride for him in last year. Has his baseline game been figured out? What's his prospect for 2023 with Novak Djokovic back in the mix?
So I think it's a bounce back spot, and you're so right. That was a surprisingly disappointing 2022 season. I always do my top 10 prediction at the start of the year. And I just did mine for this year a couple days ago. And Medvedev in last year's edition was probably my biggest miss because I thought he'd finish year-end number 1 over Novak Djokovic, just keeping up a little bit more intensity throughout the calendar. And it turned into a really rough season for Medvedev. It's weird to see a number 7 next to his name as we go into this next season. But there's a lot of factors last year that it just turned into a perfect storm of basically factors that made things difficult for him. First of all, starting the year off with that loss at the Australian Open to Nadal. That's a scarring loss. You're up 2 sets to love, and you have triple break point in the 3rd set to go up 2 sets in a break to win the Australian Open. It's a tough way to start the year.
Yeah.
Then you have him becoming number 1 without really earning it. But that's a mental adjustment, right? Because Djokovic lost his number 1 ranking because Australian Open came off.
Couldn't play.
Exactly. Indian Wells came off. So Medvedev, loses at the Australian Open, loses in Acapulco, just becomes world number 1. That's a lot to deal with, right? Then he gets a hernia.
Yeah.
I think that injury was a pretty big deal. I do, because the serve coming back from the injury until really the end of the season just didn't look quite right to me. So I think injury played a factor. Then you have, Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the distraction of just being Russian right now.
Yeah, you're right.
That's a factor.
You're right.
So all of those things, they're going to go away next year. It'll be a smoother year. However, I also think you asked me, did players figure him out? And I think the answer is yes, in a way as well. So that's why I don't think he'll ever get to number 1 again. If you had to ask me that question. I don't think he'll ever get to number 1, but I also don't think he's number 7. I think it's somewhere in the middle. Players who are volleying well, who come forward and take advantage of his court position, and then like speedier players on slower surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
Those two kinds of players are giving Medvedev problems, and I don't really see that fully changing. So I think Medvedev kind of has it basically settles into let's say number 4 in the world.
Right.
I don't think he's 7. I don't think he's 1.
Well, you brought up some interesting points because, I forgot. I shouldn't say I forgot, but these are things that an entire a linear progression of stuff happens in 2022 that you forget about, and the whole Russian thing and the hernia thing, all of those are factors that you're you're right. You just look at the results and you remember, yeah, I remember he lost and he didn't do well, but okay, there's outside factors that maybe played a role, and so maybe 2023 will be better. But we're gonna find out real quickly. Is he 100% healthy? Is he feeling in a good headspace? Because he's also playing Adelaide along with Novak Djokovic, and there's a chance that they end up bumping heads into each other. But I mean, yeah, this is the time. Do you have any predictions for him to do well at Australian Open, a tournament that he has previously done well at, but of course Novak Djokovic gets in his way? Do you think that he has a chance here to potentially outperform?
I got to see the draw, but yeah, I think he's a top 3 favorite. I think Djokovic, and then, Djokovic's probably in a tier of his own when it comes to his chances to win the title. And then after that, I would say Alcaraz and Medvedev and Nadal, those 3, I think their chances are probably all quite similar.
So I love that you mentioned Carlos Alcaraz, because that's the exact player that I want to talk about next. Medvedev for me was somebody that underperformed. Alcaraz clearly was somebody that, by far, the most memorable year for ATP player in recent times. You can look at the resume and think of oh my God, look at all the stuff that he did. What didn't Alcaraz accomplish in 2022? He was the youngest year-end world number 1 at 19. He beat almost all or most of the top 25 players. He was the first team since Rafael Nadal in 2005 to reach an ATP major final, won the US Open, I can't get over how much I still love him, and I'm super excited to see how he's able to follow up his 2022 season in this year, because he has just that similar fighting spirit to that of Nadal. And we saw an example of it against Jannik Sinner at the US Open. 4th set, Sinner was up a break. Alcaraz breaks back. Sinner breaks back again. Sinner was up 5-4, serving out the match. It gets to deuce, match point. Carlitos breaks back, and then he ends up winning. He just has the exact, you can put Alcaraz and Nadal, just put their stats next to each other, and they're just absolutely bonkers. They're the same type of player when it comes to they have no quit in them. Alcaraz in 2022, he had the weapons of the big 3. He had the fighting spirit of Nadal. He achieved greatness last year at 18, at 19, and then comes the injury. Abdominal injury in November. He was out 6 weeks with a muscle tear. He spent the off season in 2021 leading into 22 building up his physique so that way he can have a little bit more longevity, which is why he had contributed to him having such a successful year. But then now he has his abdominal tear. Do you see Alcaraz starting the year injury free?
I think so. It seemed like timeline wise, he's going to have a full off season, or he had a full off season to train, which is really essential. It puts players on the right track. Now, the good news, let's say the off season wasn't what Carlitos wanted. You can take the month of February off on tour. You can make that decision as a top player, just because of the way the schedule works. There's no Masters 1000s or anything like that in February. Right. But the big question is, what is this off season going to look like, or what did it look like for Alcaraz? Because you're right, last season was all about get bigger, get stronger, get faster, turn into a man, get in the weight room, right? What's next? And that's what's going to be so interesting to see, because if he improves the serve, which is probably the biggest technical area where he can get better, if he learns how to pick his spots to be patient, because I think he's really still maturing in that area. Right. And then lastly, if he continues to manage expectation which he obviously was able to do at the U.S. Open, but the run up until the U.S. Open, he was struggling in that area. If all
Right.
of those three things click into place, I think he's going to be the best in the world. My hunch is that maybe it takes a year for him to continue to fine tune those areas.
So then so back in, I don't know, like May, June, I had posted to Twitter, like, I love Carlos Alcaraz. He's going to win a major. I'm betting him now to win the US Open. That came to fruition. But I also, in the same tweet, posted, I'm also taking him to win the 2023 Australian Open. But of course, that was all before the abdominal tear. That was before him winning the US Open. So it's like, do you see him? Who has a better chance of winning the US Open? Medvedev? Let's take Novak out of the equation because we know that Novak does super well there. Just between the two players, do you predict who do you foresee having a more successful Australian Open? Daniil Medvedev or Carlos Alcaraz?
I think Medvedev. Now, the U.S. Open is a quick hard court. There's no doubt about it. But the Australian Open might be even quicker.
Right.
And I think in that respect, Alcaraz needs to be a little bit more consistent in the serve return dynamic, I would say. And then there's also just the factor of having won the last major and having that expectation on you at Carlos's age. I'm not concerned about him heading into Australia, but I feel like Medvedev, chip on the shoulder, kind of underdog, overlooked, written off on a surface that's really good for him. I think I slightly prefer Medvedev heading into Australia.
That's very interesting. I'm just so excited for the Australian Open. I'm super excited that Novak Djokovic is back in the mix. But before we talk about Novak, I do want to go into Nadal because
Yeah.
I'm going to tear up a bit. Okay, so Nadal is starting the year world number 2. He
Yep.
leads the ATP all-time slam record with 22. He's one ahead of Novak. Was well on his way to fighting for the calendar slam. He won the Australian Open with the help of injections in his foot. Wins Roland Garros. He withdrew from Wimbledon before the semifinal match against Nick Kyrgios. Finished the year 3-3, including losing to Francis Tiafoe in 4 sets at the U.S. Open. He sees his bestie in Roger Federer retire. Him and his wife welcome their first child. I have to ask your opinion because, like, here we are, December 31st. Is Nadal retiring in 2023?
Don't think so. And after after he lost to Cam Norrie last night at the United Cup, a reporter, they didn't ask, are you retiring, but they kind of hinted at it. And
Right.
Rafa was just like, what is this? Every time I do a press conference, I need to retire. Which, like, I totally get what he's saying. Like, it must be annoying. It must be annoying. Like, you can't
We're all
lose without.
wondering.
Exactly. But no, I don't see it right now. After I prefer to look at what he did last year completely holistically, not weight
Okay.
the second half more than the first half, because the first half was incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Where he won the first 2 majors and roared into the Wimbledon quarterfinals before injuring his ab and won that match against Fritz and then had to pull out. And my biggest what if, my biggest regret of last season is we didn't get Nadal Djokovic at Wimbledon, because that would have been okay. Who's the best in the world right now? I mean, on grass, because we
Right.
got to see it on clay. Nadal hasn't looked good in 6 months now. He hasn't played well, and there's understandably some concern there. And I think it's the hottest topic in tennis right now is what's the future for Nadal? What's the immediate future for Nadal? And my outlook is you throw what we saw in the last 6 months out the window. I think it's actually misleading people, because to me, he came back from the ab injury too quickly, wasn't ready to play Cincinnati in the U.S. Open.
And
And
a tournament that he traditionally doesn't even really play in the first place, or do well at. And so what was the point? Was it to what?
well, I
Why
think,
what's the reason for coming back too early?
so you want to get some tennis in before the U.S. Open.
Right.
So he goes to Cincinnati because he's like, I need to play before the U.S. Open. In terms of playing the U.S. Open, it's okay. Novak's not there. And, what what I just did at Roland Garros is I figured out a way to kind of conquer some health issues and win another major title. Um, I think he figured, look, even if it doesn't go well at the US Open, I have to try. I just think that's his mindset. But then he
Mhm.
comes back after another layoff. His girlfriend, sorry, his wife has a kid. I don't know why I called her. She was his girlfriend for like 11 years, Pam. We have
Forever,
to,
yeah.
yeah. Um, so you have that kind of big off court occasion. Then he doesn't play for a while. He comes back on indoor hard court and then plays a bunch of top 30 players and some top, mostly top 10, but Tommy Paul, top 30 player. And he loses every match except Casper Ruud, who wasn't really trying.
Right.
But like, of course he's going to lose. He comes
It's
back
not
off
his
of a
surface.
layoff, indoor hard court, and he doesn't get to like work into form by playing some lesser competition. So of course he's going to lose those matches. So I'm chucking it in the trash, all those
Okay.
results. I'm
That's a
looking
good
at
perspective.
22 as a whole. Yeah, I'm looking at it as a whole. The foot has been healthy, and I'm optimistic. Like, I think he's going to probably have a good season.
I'm a little bit more hesitant because just like his style of play is not conducive to another 12 months of tennis. It's he puts a lot of hours and miles on the court. Um and he likes long rallies, and it's with his issues that he's had in the past that can spring up at any moment. They're chronic injuries. So I'm just a little bit more hesitant to say that he'll be as successful, at least in the first half of the season of 2022, in 2023, especially with Novak Djokovic back in the mix and like players like Holger Rune like into it. Like there's just like a lot of competition that's starting to catch up, and his body's not getting any younger. And do you think that him not having Roger Federer like on tour anymore, even though he like realistically wasn't for so long, but like, do you think that's any bit of a mental block as well? Roger
Great
Federer
question.
retiring for similar
Yeah,
reasons, the body just caught up.
great question. I think there's a risk that Nadal starts to get a little bit spooked about his age and his body and his health. Obviously, as an athlete, you don't really want to be thinking about your body at
Right.
all or your age. Like it should not be in your mindset at all. It should be completely, uh, um, absent from
Mhm.
all of that. And yeah, with what he saw with Federer and the injuries kind of piling up in the last couple seasons, and now he just hasn't really had great results in the last 6 7 months. I think that's the biggest concern, with the exception of the risk that he just suffers another injury. Other than
Right.
that, I think the biggest concern is he starts to feel like he's getting too old.
Oh,
And that would be
yeah.
really bad. That would
That's
be really bad.
heartbreaking. I was a little bit worried when they announced that they were doing that exhibition match between him and Carlos Alcaraz in Vegas, and I was like, this is his retirement year. Like, why is he doing an exhibition match in Vegas on March? It just makes no sense to me, but I'm going, so not
Uh,
complaining.
I hope to be there too, so I'll see you there. But I mean, it makes sense. They're going to go to Indian Wells, so Vegas
Yeah.
is not far at all. That should be fun.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. So then I want to move on to my man, my main squeeze, Novak Djokovic. I am forever a lifer on him, but he is back on Australian soil, thank goodness, playing ATP Adelaide I for the first time in his career. He missed last year's Australian Open because of his vaccination status. Djokovic didn't play his first ATP tournament until Dubai in late February, played an incredible 3-set, 2-tie-break match against Alcaraz in Madrid, lost that, but that was as good of a match as you could ask for, knowing that he had some time off in between, and Carlos Alcaraz was well on the rise. So that was pretty epic. Wins Wimbledon because duh, he's the best grass court player by margin, and then ends the year with a vengeance. He played some like pretty elite tennis after Wimbledon, 12-1 on tour, 17-1 because of winning the ATP finals. His one loss during that span though, it was a good loss to breakout player Holger Rune in Paris. I'll give him that. But entering the 2023 season, what do we make of that Rune loss now? And is Djokovic on watch for another run at a calendar slam?
I want to be careful not to take credit away from Runa, but that was a fluky loss. That was he just was very unclutch in that match,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a bad day in the office to me. And
Yeah.
it wouldn't really happen on a regular basis. Just the way he lost that match, because he literally won more points than Runa and just couldn't get it done in the big moments at all, throughout the match. It's just every single time he had a chance, he squandered it. It was uncharacteristic. It was strange. I think you look at the way he played from Rome on, and it's pretty mind blowing. There were not. I mean, he lost at Roland Garros. He lost at Paris Masters. So that's Nadal on clay. Runa in a weird final. Again, I just thought, it was just one of those matches, happens once or twice a season, where you don't really have it. He won every other event he played, despite the stop-start nature of his season, which you would think would be a detriment to his level. So I was impressed with that. I was really impressed with the Wimbledon win, because he needed it. If he doesn't win Wimbledon, he goes the entire season without winning a major. He
Right.
feels that pressure on his shoulders, and somehow he just soaks it up and deals with it. And that's probably my favorite thing about Djokovic as a player, is how he deals with pressure. It's just unparalleled. And so he has that going for him. The preservation of his body is really impressive. He doesn't seem to be getting much slower. The endurance is down from where it was when he was young. He can't grind, or at least he certainly doesn't grind like he used to in the longer rallies. But that's kind of fine, because he's really fine-tuned his net game. His first serve, the spot serving, has become so good. He knows he needs to use his forehand as a weapon, and he's willing to do that now. Drop shots and such. So he's point shortening well. He's preserving his body well. I think he's gonna have another year-end #1 season.
I mean, think about it from like a viewer perspective, how fortunate we were that he had a run at a calendar slam 2 seasons ago. And then this season we had Nadal in the run for a calendar slam until it just all caught up. And now here we are potentially starting 2023. And I already have the expectation that Djokovic is going to be in the run for a calendar slam again. So that's like back to back, potentially back to seasons, 3 seasons in a row that we're seeing something that is so hard to do. But if there was any one player to do it, it would be Djokovic. Do you think at all that this is, from like a player perspective, that a calendar slam is something that a player like Djokovic would want?
No, I think it's too much of a long. I mean, in general, yes, but is that something that they're thinking about? I think
Right.
it's over too long a stretch of time. Like,
Yeah.
2 weeks is a long time. So when
Yeah.
you go to the Australian Open and you have to win every other day for 2 weeks, you have to win 7 matches. You're definitely not thinking about the calendar slam.
Right.
I don't think you're thinking about it in Paris either. When you win the first 2 and you're going into Wimbledon, that's probably when it starts to creep into your head.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still okay. I'm pretty far away. Like, I still need to win Wimbledon. Then if you win Wimbledon, we saw with Novak at the US Open, the pressure becomes enormous to try to go 4-for-4.
Yeah. But that was also just an unfortunate draw of having to play Alexander Zverev right before you played Medvedev. And that was like a 4-hour, 5-hour match, 5 sets. If the draw was just a little bit more manageable, then we could be having a different conversation here. But those are some of the 3 players
Also,
that have.
let me just add, it was an Olympic year.
No, that's true. That's true.
That was a bad draw.
That was,
Djokovic
yeah,
had to go after Wimbledon to play the Olympics in Tokyo,
exactly.
opposite time zone. I mean, it was a bad year for the Olympics to come for Novak.
Yeah. So then is there, in 2023 then, is there any one player? Those are the 3 like key players for me, but is there any one player that you're like super looking forward to, whether they did well in last year, will they continue that this year, or didn't do well last year and you're looking for them to rebound? What player are you looking for most forward to watching?
The player who I have making the biggest jump into the top 10 is Jannik Sinner,
Oh,
who
interesting.
is 15 at the moment, and it just feels too low. It feels like a deflated ranking that is not an accurate portrayal of how good he is.
He's
The
so
problem,
injury prone.
yeah, but I just think that's going to get better. See, I see
Okay.
a young player who's still developing his body. Hopefully he made some strides in the offseason. And you're right, the nagging injuries. It wasn't even like a major injury. It was just like
I
thing
have a
after thing
blister
after
and I
thing.
can't play. I'm playing the best tennis and I have a boo boo and now I gotta like withdraw. It was
Totally.
dumb injuries.
Exactly. Like all season. So that was a problem for Yannick. And then the other problem was he just wasn't finishing runs. He
Yeah.
was he was winning a couple matches every single week, which is what great players do, but 2-8 in quarterfinal matches.
Hmm.
Only one title. In 2021, he won 4 titles. So that's why it was interesting what happened. Sinner's win percentage went up.
Hmm.
74%, really good win percentage. It went up from last year. His ranking went down because he won 4 titles in 2021. He won 1 title last year.
Yeah.
Um, he just needs to finish runs. He needs to improve his head-to-heads against a lot of the best players in the world. He does play
Hmm.
Alcaraz well, but
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
other than that, he hasn't played the top guys too well. I think this is a year where I think everyone thinks he can do it and knows he can do it. I think this is the year that Sinner does it and kind of enters that tier 2 of players, where right now he's been more in the tier 3 phase. He's not actually contending for the biggest titles on a consistent basis.
You're talking about Sinner not able to finish runs. Somebody who did finish runs and made leaps in my mind, but still fell short is Felix Auger-Aliassime. He finished the year 60-27, 4 titles. After starting 0-9 in his career in finals, he finally won 4 in 2022. Now, I had high expectations for him entering the grass season, and that's where I was disappointed. Finished 4-4 in grass. He had the semifinal loss in Netherlands, but that was okay because he lost to eventual winner Tim van Rijthoven, who just phenomenal in that tournament. Quarterfinal loss to Hubert Hurkacz in Halle. First round loss to the American and Maxime Cressy at Wimbledon. Loses to Jason Kubler in Newport in the round of 16. It was just a very up and down season for Felix. So he made strides because he was able to get over the finish mark in these finals where previously hadn't. But he had such a disappointing grass court season. How much of that do you contribute to him adapting to a new coach, Uncle Tony, who's Nadal's uncle and ex-coach? Do we see him rebound in 2023? And is fast surface even his best surface? Because he had a really good clay season.
No, it's definitely his best surface. Like he loves the speed. There's no doubt about it because the serve +1 is such a weapon. Serve forehand is what his game is about. Once you
Mm-hmm.
get into the neutral baseline exchanges, there's a lot of guys better than him in that area. I thought he had a good year. Like
Mm-hmm.
going into the season, the goal was to win a title, preferably multiple, and he did
Right.
that. But it was all on indoor hard court. I kind of, maybe this is wrong of me, but I have something against that. Like, meaning I think the most important tournaments are generally outside.
Yeah.
And I think the least important months of the tennis calendar are February and October.
Football
And
season.
yeah, and Felix just tore it up in February, tore it up in October. He did have a good January as well. ATP Cup. He was great at team events.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the middle of the season, like Sunshine Double to U.S. Open, he was not very good.
Right.
So I think where his ranking is right now, 6th in the world, that's about right. I don't think he's any better than that. I think he's going to have a more consistent season. That is going to be essential. Because right now his ranking is kind of propped up by the fact that he absolutely tore it up. He won title, semifinal after the U.S. Open. And that time of year, like, it's great. It's really good that he built that momentum, but we've seen it's not always indicative of what you're going to do in the next year.
Right.
There's still areas of Felix's game that I think are a work in progress. There are a lot of areas where he's improved immensely. But I don't think he's tier one at the moment. I don't think he's on the same level or about to be on the same level as Nadal, Djokovic, Alcaraz, even Medvedev, Tsitsipas, although arguably I could see him having a better year than Medvedev or Tsitsipas.
So then you're saying that he is on that above tier you're talking about that you want Sinner to get to. Felix is already there.
Yeah, Felix is tier two. I think a lot of people are looking at, or some people, maybe I'm wrong. I think some people are looking at what he did after the U.S. Open and thinking, okay, Felix has arrived. He's ready to be a tier one guy now. I don't think so. That is where I kind of draw the line. I'm like, okay, no, you have to
Not
be
yet.
better outdoors
Yeah.
on slower surfaces before you can enter that discussion.
Well, I'm looking forward to it because, man, you're right. Like, he belongs on hard, and I was on fast grass, and I'm just like, you were just such a disappointment in grass
Yeah,
this
he's got to
year.
do better on grass.
He's got to
Yeah.
do better. So there's only one last player that I want to discuss, and I'm going to keep the off-court issues away from the conversation, but it's Alexander Zverev. He was having probably the best year of his career, playing outstanding tennis. He was such a joy to watch. 29-10 in 2022. He made the finals on clay in Madrid. He beat Carlos Alcaraz at Roland Garros in 4 sets. He was could have been, should have been well on his way to beating Nadal at Roland Garros in the semifinal, or at least it was going to be one hell of a 5th set tiebreak match. Like, it was such a great what we were watching from him. Lost the first set in a tiebreak. Second set tiebreak, he goes down from injury, rolls his ankle, tore ligaments, hasn't played since until the United Cup, which is going on now. It's his first ATP match since June. What are your expectations for Zverev entering 2023?
Well, obviously it's kind of a wild card, but I left him out of my top 10 prediction, which is it was hard to do and feels wrong because he's been a top 10 player the last 5 years, really since he was like a 19-year-old. He's been a top 10 player, but I just don't take for granted how hard it is to come back from something like this.
Right.
And we saw that with Dominic Thiem. He had 2 injuries to the same area. Not only did he tear 3 ligaments in his ankle, which everybody saw against Nadal in that semifinal, but then he was ready to come back and had this bone edema. So he had a setback and then missed the rest of 2022 when he didn't expect to. So it's 2 injuries he's coming off of. And he's someone who has had confidence issues in the past. And this kind of thing can really test that, especially when you're first coming back. How confident are you? Can you just pick up where you left off mentally and physically and just hit the ground running? And I think that is not easy. So Zverev should be a top 10 player. He is a top 10 player. I think he was really poised for probably a top 3 finish last year. Probably would have finished number 3 in the world where Casper Ruud is right now, had he been healthy for the entire season. He got up to number 2 after the French, and then now he's at number 12. But all that said, like, this is a legit scary injury. And I don't think it should just be like, oh, it's a given. He's going to be, a top 10 player again. There's no doubt about it. That's not where I'm at heading into this next season.
And then I have one final question, just because it's going to be a shorter one. Dominic Thiem, do you think he's ready to do well? Maybe even a quarters, a semis, a deep run at the Australian Open? Has he progressed that far along in his comeback that he can have a good Australian Open?
Don't think so. We'd all love to see it.
Yeah.
I think he's like back to a top 50 to top 30 level now. So that's good because he wasn't even there for a long time. Yeah, last year. So it's improving, but the key for him is the forehand needs to go back to being a top 5 forehand in the world. And if that doesn't happen, he's not quite going to be there because that's what his game was all about. And the right wrist is a key component in that forehand. So we'll keep monitoring it. I think he should be on everybody's radar for a breakout season or a comeback season, I should say. He should be on the radar, but so far he hasn't shown that it's bound to happen.
That it's consistent.
Yeah.
There's no consistency in his game. So
But
maybe
it's
that happens.
consistently better, right? It's consistently
Right.
better and better. It's just, oh, it's been slow progress.
So that, yeah, so I was actually going to do that. So like the diagram is like, instead of going just like, whoop, he is go like, oh, but it is still progressing on the upward trend. It's just very rocky in between because some days he looks phenomenal and then like, oh man, you lose to who? And it could be
Yeah.
fatigue, him trying to get back in the mix, whatever it is. But I'm looking forward to watching Dominic Thiem. So I want to ask you some rapid fire betting questions since I am a sports bettor. And these are more of like general, these are betting options that you can find online right now. But also just because they're like fun outlooks into the 2023 season. Will Alcaraz win a slam in 2023?
Yes.
Okay. How many?
1.
Exactly one is plus 110. Which one do you think is taken?
Which one? What's the
Which
question?
major? Which major is he winning?
Oh, I don't know. And I'm not going to say which one because I don't predict majors before the year.
Fine. So Alcaraz to win exactly one is plus 110 in 2023. How many majors will Djokovic win in 2023?
2.
Are you going to predict these? Which one?
No, I don't predict majors before the year because the
That's
reason
cheating.
I know because I end up biasing myself, which I don't want. I want when the draw comes out for a major, I don't
Exactly.
want to have a prediction in my head. I want to
You're
look
right.
at it with just nothing in my head so that I can make my prediction, in my opinion, in the purest fashion.
Fair enough. Which player, these are multiple questions, multiple options. Which player is more likely to win one major? The options are Alcaraz, Nadal, Medvedev, Sinner, Kyrgios, Felix, or Taylor Fritz.
Are we looking for value here, like a dark
Okay.
horse to win one?
So the ones that are two at even or worse odds are Alcaraz and Nadal. The getting plus money would be Medvedev, Sinner, Kyrgios, Aliassime, or Fritz.
I'd probably take Sinner or Kyrgios there if we're looking for kind of an underdog type. I don't know exactly what they are, but for a guy like Sinner at his age with his trajectory, I always look for like the US Open as a huge opportunity where you don't know how much they will have developed and progressed by US Open time. So you were smart. You took Alcaraz futures for the US Open. I had a hunch that he might win the US Open before the year. And I think it's a similar spot for a guy like Rune or a guy like Sinner. You want to take that kind of number because by US Open time, you just don't know where they're going to be.
Right. Kyrgios, I'm not sure he'll ever win a major. He does well against lesser opponents. He doesn't do well against top 5 caliber.
If he just keeps up this level of
interest,
effort, effort and fitness. If he does that, I think he's gonna win one. Probably Wimbledon.
Okay. Well, for Kyrgios to win a major, it is plus 275, and for Sinner, it is plus 200. Who will finish higher in the rankings by year end? Felix, Auger, Aliassime, Jannik Sinner, Taylor Fritz.
One more time.
Who will finish higher in the rankings by the year end? Felix, Sinner, Fritz.
So I think it's between Felix and Sinner. I'll go Felix. I'm close to going Sinner. I have them. I'm pretty sure in my top 10 ranking. I have them at 7 and 8. I have Felix. Yeah, I have Felix at 7 and Sinner at 8. I'll take the weapons with Felix, the serve and forehand.
Plus 130. Here's a good one for you. Who will have a better year? Alexander Zverev or Casper Ruud?
Zverev or Ruud? Ruud.
Interesting.
I mean, there's no health issues. Yeah, he is the underdog. Yeah, I mean that doesn't surprise me. Look, I'm actually high on Ruud because he fixed his backhand, and that's what was holding him back.
Had a really great hard court season when typically he was clay all the way. I'm really
the return and the defense work in progress, but the backhand was the big issue with his game. Everything else was pretty good, and he fixed that backhand. So I feel great about Ruud.
Now, this is one for the Americans. Who will have a better 2023 season? Taylor Fritz or Frances Tiafoe?
Fritz. I'm confident in Fritz. He has shown what he does. He is a really, really strong power baseliner. There's not that big a difference at this point between Taylor Fritz and Andre Rublev. Like, they're very similar players at this point, and we should start to see Fritz, in my opinion, produce some similar results that we've seen from Rublev the last couple of years. It doesn't mean he is going to go on insane runs and win a major, but I think it does mean that he's going to be a player that hovers between 7 and 11 in the rankings quite consistently.
Right. And then one final betting question, and this is, which player will repeat an achievement that they had in 2022 in 2023? So, for example, Novak won ATP Rome. Will he win that again? Matteo Berrettini won ATP Queens. Will he win that again? Carlos Alcaraz won Miami. Kyrgios, will he reach the final of Wimbledon once again? Tsitsipas, will he win Monte Carlo? Alcaraz, will he win Barcelona and Madrid? And then you start to get into the super long shots. Taylor Fritz to win Indian Wells. Borna Coric to win Cincinnati. And then Pablo Carreño Busta to win ATP Montreal. I think of all of these that I've mentioned, there's two of them that are really intriguing to me. Fritz to win Indian Wells and Berrettini to win Queens, because historically they just perform so well at those tournaments.
Yes, but Fritz faces intense competition at Indian Wells.
Yes.
Everybody is there. Whereas Queens, Berrettini is often, for some reason, the fields haven't been as good recently at Queens. Yeah, Berrettini's never lost there. He's amazing there. That one kind of stood out to me, no doubt about it. Same with Alcaraz at a Barcelona 500, where you know he's going to play that because it's Spain, but you're not going to have a killer field. So those are the one. I think Alcaraz, Barcelona, Berrettini, Queens. Those are the ones that caught my ear.
Matteo Berrettini to win ATP Queens is 3-1, and I really like that option because he's automatically probably going to be the top 2 favorite of minus money or a plus, maybe 2-1. So of anything, that would be the one of value. Now, I do want to briefly touch on ATP Adelaide, which is the first tournament of the year. We have Novak Djokovic back in the mix. I am super excited at it. Have you looked at the draw
for Adelaide?
For Adelaide, we have Novak Djokovic in the same quarter. We have Daniil Medvedev, Djokovic and Medvedev in the same quarter as each other. And then I have to close that out and reopen it. There you go. We have Sinner is in the mix, Karen Khachanov, Maxime Cressy, Andre Rublev, Holger Rune, and then, of course, Felix Auger Aliassime. Have you looked at the draw?
No, I haven't gotten a chance. I did look at the entry list, and I've seen how just absolutely stacked the tournament is, but I haven't gone quarter by quarter. I feel like this is I'm feeling Medvedev. I just think this is the start of kind of that message sending period of I'm not as bad as you think I am because of last year.
Well, since you haven't looked at the draw, Medvedev is expected, if all goes well, Medvedev and Djokovic could end up meeting in the semifinal.
Yeah, I hope we see it. That'd be fun. Their head-to-head is so interesting. They play great matches, but Medvedev has continued to be pretty successful. Even in that match that they played in Astana, where Medvedev just tries to make it really physical and tries to lengthen rallies and make it a grind fest. And Daniil against Novak, he does pretty well playing that kind of style.
And then there's one potential matchup. We could see Felix Auger-Aliassime against Holger Rune in the quarterfinal. Who would you get? Who would you pick for that one?
It's the two. Rune's the great mystery. It's Zverev and Rune. Those are the great mysteries coming into next year. Look, give me Rune. I'm very high on Holger, and I just feel like he kept very, very, very active in the offseason, where Felix probably took more of a rest period, given how physical, emotional, and just busy those last couple months of the season were.
You know why I cannot be a fan of Holger, though? His
Why?
attitude.
You don't like it?
Do you?
Um, I
Do you
like
not
it
mind
for.
it?
Look,
Like it for drama?
yeah, I like it for the sport. I like it if someone's going to be an antagonist
Yeah.
and make people feel a certain way about him. I'm kind of a fan of that. Um, yeah, I'm not. I also think off the court, he seems like a pretty good kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, on the court, he's totally antagonistic. There's just no doubt about it. So yeah, all in all, I don't mind it.
Who's
But
the better villain? Kyrgios or Rene?
Curious, but I always take a distance. Like I come from a distance when it comes to something like this because I'm not looking for players to like and dislike, generally speaking.
Right.
So I'm just like, okay, people don't like him. That's cool. Like that's actually probably a good thing. So I'm always kind of have that removed outlook.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So then one final question just to close up. Early look at Australian Open. Of course, we don't have a draw, and I also like looking at draws before I take any wagers. But Novak Djokovic right now is the plus 120 favorite, followed by Carlos Alcaraz, and then Daniil Medvedev, and then Kyrgios is fourth, and then Nadal closes out the top five. Sinner is sixth in the betting odds. Is there any player early outlook who is right now? I know you don't like to do your predictions, but it's
That's
only a
fine.
few weeks away. Who do you like to win for Australian Open? Would
Well,
you
I
bet
I
Novak now?
certainly. What's the number on Djokovic?
Plus 120.
Yeah, I might take it. I might take it. I mean, I think he's the clear favorite at the moment. I think it might be kind of a buy low opportunity on Medvedev. I like Djokovic as the favorite. I even think Nadal, it could be buy low for Nadal as well right now
Buy
with
low.
how
Wins Australian Open last year, and it's a buy low spot for Nadal.
what's
Well,
Nadal's number?
He is actually. I was gonna say it actually is because he's 11-1 to win Australian
Exactly.
Open. He's the fifth
Exactly.
favorite.
See, I think there's probably value there. I mean, he's just being completely written off because not completely written off, but what we saw at the end of last year, I think skews the perception of Nadal heading into this year.
Yeah. Well, I'm really interested in the 2023 season. I'm super excited. I, of course, can't wait for grass because I love grass season. So we only get it for a very short window, but I'm looking forward to that. Gil, I do appreciate you hopping on and talking some tennis with me. Can I count on you to join me to talk Australian Open once the time
Yeah,
comes?
for sure.
Absolutely. So do make sure to follow Gill on Twitter at Gill_Gross. You can follow all of his stuff that he does on the Tennis Channel now as a broadcaster. Congratulations to that, by the way. Now he is also part of the Cracked Racquets podcast and host of the Monday Match Analysis on YouTube. If you want to get better at understanding the game of tennis, watch his Monday Match Analysis. He does a really great job of breaking the match down to a T. You can follow me at Twitter at PamelaM35 and 2023 Tennis. It's here.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.